Well, Alan, I'm surprised that you're here. That's really early.
Yeah, I've just been.
We're going to start in about a minute. So if you want to reveal your faces, you can do so at that time. Hey, Liam, are you Stimpy? Just have to put stop mute.
Hello.
Are you Stimpy? Is that you? The picture of Stimpy?
No, it's just a crow.
Oh,
Yeah,
you're the
I'm
pro.
Stimpy.
Good. That's great. I once almost threw up watching a Ren and Stimpy show.
I feel
Oof.
like that was the intention.
It probably was
Yeah,
because it was really gross.
that show freaked me out as a kid. I probably should not have watched that at a very young age.
I was in graduate school. Freaked me out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have 11 at the present time. No, there's Liam. Hi, Liam. Liam? Are you a true freshman?
No, I'm not. I'm actually technically a junior transfer.
Got
But
it.
for some reason, for the longest time, and I think it still might be, I think I still might be classified as a freshman.
You
So
are, but
great.
that's okay. I don't care what they classify you as long as this class doesn't come as a surprise to you. That's all. What do we got now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We should have 3 more coming in. All right. Well, I'm going to start because you guys paid your money for the full 2 hours twice a week. I'm Eric Levin, if you don't know me. Um, is this your first time, Liam, in the theater program? Is this your first term?
Yes, I just had the theater foundations, I believe. So
Okay.
I came all the way from the theater building back down to McLaughlin. So
Sorry.
so no worries.
I just
I
have to
can make
walk
it.
from my bedroom to here. So, but everybody, this is Liam. He's new to the department, so make Liam welcome.
Hi, Liam.
Hello.
If
You don't have to
possible,
make me feel welcome. We could have some classic college hazing going here.
no,
So
don't say that. Don't, it's bad enough. Don't say that. But he told me to pants him and bring it up the flagpole. No, we haze in a different way here. We torture you with friendship and happiness. Maybe. Anyway, my name's Eric Levin. I'm going to be your instructor for this time. Um, I'm really sorry about the class time. I turn on the invitation is for 10 and it extends for 3 hours. That doesn't mean we're going to be here for 3 hours. I turn it on at 10 in case anybody wants to ask questions. I'm usually here. If I'm not, I've just gone to get a drink of water, or more coffee, or you know, other things that might, hey, Tatum. Others that might make us, other things that might take me away, but I'll be back in just a couple of minutes, so don't fret. I think you guys can come on regardless if I've come on. I don't think I designated myself as the host because I just find that kind of weird. So anyway, this is topics in drama absurdism, and I've never taught this at the undergraduate level before. Years ago, I taught at the graduate level for the summer students, and I would have let undergraduates come in with a different syllabus and do that. But at the time, internet classes were fairly new, and it was really difficult for undergraduates to keep up. So if I have any advice for you at all, any important advice, is to keep up with the class. And I have reinforced that. You're going to have a reaction paper to, and we'll go over those in a second, a reaction paper to each of the plays, but that that assignment closes when we move on to the next week. So so you're going to start reading with Waiting for Godot on Monday, or you can read it whenever you want. We're going to start discussing it on Monday, so you should have already had it read. And then the following Sunday, the discussion board will be turned off. Okay, so the ongoing discussion during the week helps you get some feedback. And I join the discussions too, usually if necessary. I try to let that be a free space for you guys. But if I can steer you, I'll steer you. So that your reaction papers come at the end of that discussion. Okay. You do need to it's required to be on the discussion board. I think I said once or twice a week. So if you start your own thread, that's probably it. And if you don't, if you just answer other people's stuff, as long as it brings in new information or a new interpretation into the play or some additional analysis, 2 of those would be fine. But feel free to post as often as you like. I'm going to take a quick check to see who's not here. Isaac. Anybody know Isaac? Okay. I've never met him, so we'll see what happens. All right. I'm going to take you to the Moodle site. Let's just go over. It's a pretty basic Moodle site. And if I do that and go to there, then I can do that and share screen. And then we're gonna, after that, we'll look at the syllabus really shortly. And then I actually have a short lecture for you. Kind of a background. Can you all see that? I think you can. I am screen sharing. Okay. So I never use the announcements, and Moodle won't let me erase that. So that's there. It'll tell me if you put something in it. So if you have something to announce, that's fine too. I really like it when students announce productions that they're doing. You know, post other things, especially off-campus things that you're doing, so that we all have the opportunity to share in that. So here's the kind of the general things. The syllabus is here. The syllabus statements are here. I think you should take a look at that at least once a year to make sure you're aware of all the supports that we have. The provost sends them out each term, and it's really an extension of the syllabus, but it's about 5 or 6 pages. So you can just look through the topics that it has and see if any of them apply to you. Here's our Zoom invitation. Just click on it, and you'll come to and these are the days that there are. November 10th is a holiday, and I'll add that to the syllabus, or add that to probably the Moodle site, because that's where I have a play-by-play. I may repost this without all of those weeks in it so that you can come in and just click. And there you be, join the meeting. Anybody use dial-up? Neither do I. But that's what that's for, is if you have to, if you don't have enough space to talk and do video, or if you have a bad connect, you can connect with your phone and listen, and then have the and then just use your video for that. Heading back. All right, I've added a couple things. This is the introduction week. We only have one day. I posted this morning, I went and posted Theater of the Absurd by Martin Esslin. You do not have to read this book, but quite frankly, it is the premier reference. Any paper you have on the absurd is gonna about absurdist theater is going to include Theater of the Absurd. Nobody came in and said, I'm writing in the style of Theater of the Absurd. Martin Esslin, who came from San Francisco, ran the actors workshop in San Francisco. No, he didn't. I lied. That was a different person. But anyway, he wrote this book in 1961, trying to kind of look at this new theater that came out of after World War II, often by people who fought in the war. At least two of them were in the French Resistance. And it was a very different kind of theater. So this book has an introduction, but it basically goes through the playwrights that we're going to talk about, and gives you some biography, some critical analysis, and talks about the way you can view their plays. These are hard plays to understand. You can tell by Waiting for Godot. This is from 1945 on. Waiting for Godot has been a play that everybody knows the name of, but few people understand. Bert Lahr, who played Gogo in the original American production, always said, he's a comedian. He was the Cowardly Lion in the original Wizard of Oz. This is quite a bit later, but this was on stage. He said he never understood it. And Beckett, when he's asked what it means, he would only say, it means what it says. Whatever you see on paper is what it means. He refused to interpret it for people, and there was good reason for that. But for a lot of people, it was difficult. Now, my wife and I went to see a production when we were in Ireland by a very, very good professional Irish company, the Druid Theatre. And she had never seen it before. Her favorite plays are musicals. She doesn't like deep stuff that is too difficult to understand. I was a little worried because it's not a short play. She understood it perfectly. It was a really good production. And when you see it on stage, it's easier to understand it than when you read it. So if you ever get a chance to see Waiting for Godot, and it's a professional production because it's hard to interpret. Yeah, Liam. Was that a question?
Oh, no, but I will say I think my high school professor, my high school teacher had too much ambition and tried to have us understand this play. And I think honestly studying it in college is a lot better just because, older and a little bit more mature. But honestly, I have tried. I agree. Like it's one of the hardest plays to wrap my brain around, and I really, no matter how many times I read it, no matter how many times I just like try to sit down and think about it, I can't figure out like what the meaning of the show is.
Right. And it means what it means. He's right. But you don't get that meaning through the dialogue or even through character like most plays. And that is a trait of Theater of the Absurd. it is less about what people say, and it's more about the world of the play, the situation that they're in, and how they react to it. And that should tie to the human experience. And we'll talk about it specifically for each play, but each play, you can't really analyze the plays. You can't say this is how you analyze absurdist theater, because the playwrights have nothing in common. Waiting for Godot is called a tragicomedy, and it has very funny moments, but they don't seem to tie into the plot. So we'll talk once we read it, and I would really encourage you to reread it, Liam, because you are more mature and your mind knows more. Is Sean still teaching that in the third freshman class? What's it called?
Elements?
Thank you. Elements of Design. I'm sorry, I just lost the word. Is he still teaching that?
No,
Thank
I don't
you,
believe
no.
so.
Did you take it 2 years ago? Okay. He usually does. He either does Waiting for Godot or often I guess the Dumbwaiter has replaced that. Anyway, so this Theater of the Absurd is a way for you to get into that. It's a little bit academic in its language, that kind of dense language that professors try to show off, but it's much less than many of them. So sometimes you have to think about what he's saying, but most of the time it's pretty clear, especially the biographical pieces. Good news, all of your plays are online. So if you bought them and don't want to spend the money, you feel free to return them. These are all pretty significant plays and would be a good addition, though, to your library of plays. Plays that you might want to do in the future. They're all mostly still very popular when they're performed. Some of them don't get performed very much. So each of your sections, I didn't do it by week, I did it by sections. I give you the text, then you get your discussion board, and that gives you kind of a context to what other people are thinking, which I think is a really important aspect of this class, that you hear what other people's interpretation is. Don't necessarily believe them, stick with what you think, but it makes for very good discussion. And your reaction paper is not due October 1st. It's due, I believe, October 8th. So I will go down and check all of those. Okay. Rhinoceros, which is a great play. I think you'll like it. Reaction paper. It's not due September 8th. God. Thank you for pointing that out, everybody. It's not due then. I'll go back and go over that. But we're reading Waiting for Godot next week. The Visit by an Old Lady, that's always abbreviated The Visit, by Frederick Durmont, and there is a 2 dots above the U. I have not been able to figure out how to put special lettering in. And I can't bring it over to Moodle even when I try. But anyway, it's a very good play. I was blown away the first time I read it in graduate school, and even chose it as my directing project, to do a scene from it for my directing project. And about that week, I'm going to stop offering you prompts on the papers, on your reaction papers, because I want you to start being able to come up with what you want to write about this play. And we'll go over the reaction papers in just a second. The American Dream is our only American absurdist play here. Edward Albee, you might know from I'll get it in a second. I'll come back to that. Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf is his most famous play. And he also did the Zeus Story, which is very, very popular in speech and debate for doing a comic or a dramatic interp, because it's basically one monologue But he's a very interesting playwright. This is about America, and it's kind of ridiculous. The Homecoming, Harold Pinter is a guy who likes to play with language. All of his plays are surrounded by the nonverbal elements that we find in the way people speak, and it's usually a very threatening kind of subtext to all his plays. The Pinter pause is a famous tactic in drama that he came up with. He has 3 different pauses in his plays. He has 3 dots, which means about 10 seconds before you start the next part of your line or your next line. And then boy, what's the second one? Anyway, then there's another one that's about 30 seconds. And then when he says pause, it's like a minute, a very, very long pause. And there's all sorts of subtext going on within that pause. And if I can find my video of this, you may have seen it in a previous class, but this will help you understand the Homecoming better. And then finally, What the Butler Saw by Joe Orton, which is a 1960s gay play, but he had to hide the fact that he was gay because it was still the 1960s. So his plays occur in a world in which morality has been turned around. So kind of like today, there's no truth in what people say, and they often espouse the exact opposite moral context that they actually live. And the reason for that is that in the gay community, everybody in his world, because it was an underground community in the 60s, it was still illegal to be gay, to perform sodomy, to have anal sex with anybody, and there was even worse social aspects to it. But Joe Orton lived in that world and wrote a world in which everyone was seen as he believed homosexuals were seen at that period of time. It's very raunchy, it's very inappropriate, and it's one of my favorite. I lied about Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. That is not on our syllabus. So I'm going to cut that one, if that's okay with you. And then you're going to have the final research paper, which we'll go over, not today, but in ensuing weeks. Questions about the term? And of course, we'll be meeting on Mondays and Wednesdays. If you are fully participating in those classes, I probably won't worry about the discussion boards for you. If you would rather be verbal than use written language, that's fine too. So they'll be kind of tantamount to discussion boards. Questions? Anybody? Okay, please use your I raise my hand button if you want to ask a question at any time during any class, because that puts you up to the top of the little row of people, that the pictures, and then I can see that you have a question. All right, let's go over
I'm
this.
so sorry. Where is that button?
I didn't know that there was a button in which you can raise your hand.
Reactions.
Yes,
Under
yeah,
reactions.
it may be under
Reactions.
more.
Cool.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Can you see that? And you can't, can you see that on your screen? The more and 3 little buttons. So I'm recording now. I'm going to record all our classes and post them after they're done. So reactions include this little, oh, that's clapping, thumbs up. That is not it. Apps, control, annotate. Oh, maybe it's under participants. Nope.
It's
Huh.
under reactions. It just says raise hand.
I don't have reactions here. Is it on here? Oh, there it is. Thank you. That's hard to get to. There you go. The whole bottom thing is raise hands. That just makes sure that I can see it. You can also interrupt me verbally because I only see 3 of you up there if I'm up there. And I after a while I turn myself off because I get focused in on what I look like. But anyway, feel free to raise hand, or I don't take it as an insult if you want to ask a question and you interrupt. Okay. So the syllabus. Oh, I already did that. Come on, there we go. Can you all see that? Or do I have to reshare? It says syllabus, theater arts 548. No. Share screen. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard that. Thank you, Madeline. So here I am. I do not have an office this term. I am completely off campus. But I have extended office hours. I'm gonna click on that. I can take that off for you. No, you did it. Anyway, I've extended office hours to every afternoon, Monday through Thursday. So you can make an appointment. I'm teaching a USIM class, or what used to be called USIM. And so I'm advising all of them as incoming freshmen, and most of them aren't. But anyway, so for them, I've extended it. You can make an appointment. I'm going to take a class with Karen Bolda this afternoon. I've tried to put myself on Navigate for years and I've never followed through when it didn't work. So I'm gonna make sure I'm on Navigate so that you can make appointments that way. I also give you my cell phone number. You can call anytime you want. I put do not disturb on. It starts at 10 and ends at 7 a.m. So I don't take calls in between then, but any other time you can call me if you have questions. And if you want, you can text me. That's fine too. It's my cell phone. And if it's during my do not disturb hours, then I'll get it the next morning really early and respond before you wake up, unless you wake up early. All right. I'm going to let you read the parts that you can read. This is why we're not reading Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, which may leave us a hole at the end of the term, but I don't think any of you will mind that. And there's a list of the plays that we have. Again, they're all online. Assignments: read a play each week, write a 1 to 2 page response paper each week addressing what you believe the play is about and the textual clues that lead you to your analysis. So it's just a short analysis of your understanding of the play and why you think that. Okay? Please do not say, I don't get it. Force yourself to make a decision. Okay? Until you make a decision, start making decisions about plays you read, and this isn't a bad thing. It takes years to start to feel comfortable. What I'm doing is forcing you to make the choices, and once you start making choices, it becomes a lot easier. I can give you feedback, and I will be grading these. I'll give you feedback. These are very low impact papers, but to give you feedback on what you might look for in that particular play. And again, these plays are not related at all. And then here's our discussion board. They will be graded, and a 4 to 7 page critical analysis. Later, I'm going to be putting up the MLA, MLA style, which is appropriate for humanities. And really the only difference in the citations between social science and humanities is that social science, which works a lot with polls and surveys and picture of the moment kinds of information, they need to know what year, when those articles came out. We don't care, because we can go to any of, we can talk about a play in terms of what Sophocles or any critic from whatever age said about that play. So we don't care as much about the date. And all of our information is interpretive. So your research paper should be looking at what everyone else said about this play, and then analyzing and coming up with your own. Hi, Isaac. You snuck in on me. Glad to have you.
I'm glad to be here. Sorry for being so late. I got a little caught up after our theater meeting today.
Oh,
It won't be a common occurrence, I promise.
do we have a theater meeting? You mean foundations?
Yeah, foundations.
Got it. That happens, and don't worry about it too much. I try to be flexible. Anytime. Anyway, you're not in trouble. Your response papers are going to be 70% of your grade. Your analysis paper, your response papers are going to be 70% of your grade. So those weekly response papers are where the bulk is. But if you just do the response papers, that's going to be only 70 points, and you'll be 30 shy if you don't turn in your final. And of course, it's 30 points tops for the final. So that will bring you up to an A once you turn that in. If you are at some sort of in between your attendance and your forum postings, and discussion during class will rate whether you move up or down on that, and that can be significant for some people. Okay, so basically, if you invest some time into the class, and it's a little bit harder because of the added obstacle of self-discipline, which I've only had since I was adult, probably in my 30s, and started graduate school. That's a huge obstacle. So, and I will be contacting you if you miss a class and stuff like that. I'm not looking for a reason that you miss class. I am just keeping up and letting you know that you were missed. I don't think there's anything else you need. I still check my email here. Is there anything else you guys want to know about the class based on this stuff? Okay.
Yeah, I have a small question.
Yeah.
I came in right as you're talking about Theater of the Absurd by Martin Esslin. Is that required reading?
No.
Okay.
Good question, because that's exactly what I said about it. It's not required reading. But it is the first book to address Theater of the Absurd. And I have a kind of a lecture here for the rest of the period. And we'll put a break in there too. I've started setting my alarm for the break. Let me see if it's, so we have about 15 minutes, then we'll break and we'll come back to the lecture. But Martin Esslin coined the phrase Theater of the Absurd. And then he basically wrote about each of the authors that we're going to be writing about through Harold Pinter. So I think there's one or two specific playwrights that he doesn't talk about. Harold Pinter was a chapter in which he talked about a whole bunch of different minor playwrights. But then Harold Pinter became one of the most important playwrights of Theater of the Absurd, and one of the most important playwrights in England. And so he later in the third edition gave him his own chapter, and that's the edition I put up. Isaac, was that about Waiting for Godot, your comment?
Oh no, that was about Theater of the Absurd. I've read through 3/4 of that book. I got kind of cold feet towards the end of it, but compared to other books I've tried reading on like the subject of like absurdist theater and like conceptual stuff, it reads a lot easier than its contemporaries.
Good.
Um,
I like him.
his segment on Eugene Ionesco is my personal favorite. Also, his segment on Atomov is good. But the rest, like, it kind of gets a little textbooky, but it is what it is.
Yeah, and remember in 1961, my philosophy, my approach to absurdist theater is I see it as a post World War II bridge between modernism and postmodernism. And I'm going to go over a little bit. You've all heard my modern, some of you have heard my modernism things. It's a really important part of how I view theater. Modernism, postmodernism, and its cousin classicism are to me are three different ways of viewing the world, three different world views. And those world views affect everything in the cultures in which the majority of people have that view. And so as such, classical writers, beginning with Shakespeare in that period in the Renaissance, they begin to look at the world very differently, but because of the low technology of most of that time in history, it's a very long time before classicism, which is a group of rules in which plays have to be written, give way to a more progressive modernism. And the time between modernism and postmodernism had an overlap in the 60s rather than hundreds of years of overlapping between Shakespeare and the early 1800s. So there was about a 200-year overlap between modernism and postmodernism. I'm sorry, classicism and modernism, because of the technologies. And of course, technology is a huge part of postmodernism. It may be the most important part, is that we have this instant communication. But that started in the 1960s with all the technologies he developed from World War II. And people began to question the old ways of thinking. And this is all have to do, for those of you who've taken my class, with the Nietzschean idea of from Thus Spake Zarathustra, of the three metamorphoses: the camel, the lion, and the child. So that's a good starting off point for a lecture. I can't think of a better one. So modernism, and we're at a postmodernism phase today, which means after modernism. I don't know why they called it that. It began in probably with Ibsen back in the 1860s, and a little bit before, but it's defined as a theatrical it's defined as an expression which denies or rebels against absolute truth. So in England, whatever the absolute truth. So in England, capitalism rather than religion, because they were pretty free religiously for most of that period. Capitalism, more than religious adherence, defined their reality. They believed in free trade, which is also the philosophy of the most hard right conservatives, who believe that trade should not be limited at all, that people should be allowed to cheat, steal. There should be no laws that have to do with business. And of course, that's the time when England had a slave trade, when they had colonies all over the world. All of that within this worldview that England was superior to everyone else and the smartest people should rule everybody else. And basically that was their worldview. Other places like France, Their worldview was more in keeping with Catholicism, Spain also, and in Germany, which didn't organize these little countries into Germany into one country until just after World War One. They had many battles between Protestants and Catholics. The 100 Years' War was up in the Germanic states, and the main countries there were Prussia, Austria, and the Holy Roman Empire, which changed throughout history. So there were all these forces there, and mostly due to religious beliefs. The Protestantism started in Germany, and it was early adherent of Protestantism. But they still had their Catholic. So anyway, modernism kind of began in this disruption of ideas, in which the ideas from the Enlightenment began to take over our thinking. Scientific thought kind of replaced religious thought little by little, starting in the 1700s and moving all the way through to today. And we're still heavily influenced by the Enlightenment and the Counter-Enlightenment, which is actually, in literary terms, that's Romanticism. But we're not going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about modernism. But all these forces kind of came in to disrupt how people thought, and then the art began to change to coincide with selling tickets to the theater. So most modernism is about, has a worldview in which absolute truth is questioned. That often it doesn't come up with an answer, it comes up with the question. And then the person who's watching the play or reading the book answers the question for themselves. This is rot, I'm putting it down, or wow. Those are the two different reactions. Okay, so early modernism attempted to refine truth through many different forms of art. We call them the isms, and each one kind of reflected a different worldview because there was no absolute idea that people could cling to. And a lot of people kind of gave up on life at this point, and either gave up on life or became even more conservative in the absolute truths that they believed in. And we still have that today. And all over the world, there are different countries whose culture is based on different levels of this worldview, which either looks at the world as absolute or as more subjective. So some of those are, if you've heard of them, as expressionism, which question the idea of universality and focused on individual perspectives. So the expression of the individual and how the world affects them. There was futurism, which idealized technology and wanted to drive culture into the future. They wanted to get rid of libraries. They wanted to get rid of history. They wanted to live life in the moment toward a more dynamic future. This was Aiden.
I'm sorry, were you saying this all the isms, is this part of the modernist phase or postmodernist?
Yes.
Modernist.
This is kind of leading up to absurdism.
Okay, but modernist.
Yes. Absolutely. You had that in third term theater and culture. We talked about it. So that's your reference point if you need it. And then there was Dadaism, which has become more influential today than it was in its own day. And Dadaism views the world as a chaotic place that has no controlling factors. And they viewed it in a kind of lighthearted way. So the world is chaotic. No one's controlling what happens. There's no such thing as destiny. There's no such thing as God. And their viewpoint was that since we don't know, it doesn't matter. Um, they didn't write plays per se, but they had performances that included poetry, often specific documents that have been cut up, and they take out chance phrases for each line of their poem. And of course, those are read, not written down, because who cares if you write them down? It's all chance anyway. And short vignettes. I can't think of a Dadaist play, but all of the arts in Dadaism, first when it started in Switzerland, and then it moved to France when Tristan Tzara, its founder and leading exponent, moved to France. It kind of followed him. And it kind of anticipated postmodernism, in which we decentralize any idea that unites us as a people. Okay, some people call it postmodernism, post-truth, and that's usually in political terms. So if you hear the term post-truth, it's saying that there's no absolute truth. You have to interpret the world. And some people take that to mean there's no morality, but there is morality. You just have to develop your own morality based on how you want to be viewed by the world and how you want to view the world. And if you don't believe other people have meaning in your life, you might be greedy. You might be very closed-minded. And if you believe in humanitarianism, it's a different worldview. Okay, so when I'm talking about modernism, postmodernism, I'm actually talking about the worldview of the culture. Does that kind of make sense to people? Are there questions about that? Or one question might be, I don't get it, do I? And then I can maybe drill down a little bit more. Okay, so
Yeah, I got a quick question
ahead.
for you. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I'm so sorry, I totally missed it. When you're talking about post-truth and you're saying how it was like, no, there's no absolute truth, all must be interpreted. Was that saying that the phrase post-truth and postmodernist can be interchanged, or did I misunderstand that?
They can't be interchanged, but they both kind of mean the same thing.
Okay.
Most cultures in Europe their culture was developed from a specific religious standpoint. And that became the absolute truth for that country. And of course, the people who had no power had to live by whatever tenet the leader of that country said was important to their religion. And that came from both the Pope and from the king. And historically, that dates back way to Charlemagne. But I don't want to go into that history. It's an interesting history, though, the expansion of religion during the Middle Ages. But what I'm saying is that in the classical times, each culture adhered to a specific form of absolutism in which these were facts. God created the earth. The 10 Commandments had to be followed. That was the focus of truth within that culture. And Catholicism, most Christianity, if you think about it, is based on two different things. One is the idea that all people are sinners simply by being born human. They're sinners. And the other one is sinners can earn a place in heaven if they're good during their lifetime. So life is really a test of whether you get into heaven or not. And there are different rules in different cultures for doing that. Protestantism is very different than Catholicism in how people have to live their lives. And Judaism is completely different. And so is Islam. So The modernist period is when people started questioning these ideals, these old ideals that talk about what everybody has to do, regardless of who they are. Because of course, the more powerful could choose and pick and choose what they wanted to do, and their actions were seen as models for whatever was right in the country. And modernism began to question that. Postmodernism has dropped the idea that there's any system within the universe that controls us. Okay, actions are actions. You can ascribe a grade to everybody's action, good or evil or anything in between. Let me finish this sentence, then we'll take a break. But in a postmodern society, it's your perspective that rules what you do, and it often has nothing to do with other people. Now, if you think about America today, because this is still early postmodernism, it really didn't take effect until it began in the 1980s. So that's actually pretty long, 40, 50 years. But the accepted truth now is that there is no truth. Okay. And there are all sorts of ramifications for that. Our society mistreated African Americans through the institution of slavery is an idea that didn't come about until starting maybe in the 1950s. There were people who were against slavery all through history, but they weren't the majority, and that's not the way our culture, our system worked, if that makes sense. I'm going to let you think on that, and let's take about 10 minutes. Take a break, get something to eat, get something to drink, use the restroom, whatever you want, and we'll be back at 11:30. I'll be here most of the time, but I'm going to take a quick break now. I think my wife just woke up. See you soon. Uh-oh. Oops. I'm coming back. What? You know, I was just wondering that myself. Ask Elizabeth. She's outside. In the middle of teaching. I'm just on a break. You got it handled? I think they might be in the sauna, but as long as you're there, you might as well ask Elizabeth. And where are you gonna go? You can come over there if you want. That's fine. You wanna come over? Come on. Don't make out with your sister. That's gross. You wanna go out? You can go out. What is it, Dad? You wanna go out or stay in? Go see Kyle. Where's Tristan? Is Tristan not coming? You should check your phone. He's about a half hour late. Oh, he did? That's why. Okay. Look at everybody. I hope you got a chance to see my girls, Jasmine and Venus. Jasmine is actually, when she kisses Venus, it's hostile, not. It's kind of a, I can do this if it's kind of a harassment thing. All right, I'm gonna turn my thing. I've always had problems with breaks. Most of you know that. So I'm trying this, and if I can remember to do it the whole term, it might help. All right, is everybody here? Madeline, you back? All right, I'm gonna assume so. Uh-oh. Cool. I don't, oh, good, thanks, Madeline. Good, thanks, Rosemary. I don't care if you have your cameras on or off, but I hate to speak to empty names on the board, so. You know, you can do whatever you want, and if you don't want to be seen as, it's not rude for you to get up. I noticed Isaac turned off his screen at one point, and that's fine. When I have to go to the bathroom, I go to the bathroom. I generally don't turn off my camera though, and I don't care if you don't either. It's not like you're going AWOL. All right. So modernists, especially, well, so the modernist period was started in the mid 1800s and went up all the way up through the 1970s with that overlap that I was talking about, and it became the standard form of theater, the kind that we're used to now. It often railed against the government or whatever the status quo was, because art became a way of reforming society in an artist's small way. And that's when theater became, people began to assume people in theater were liberal, because the output of the art had to do with improving society, and that began basically with that began basically with oh, I forgot what I was going to say. I'm sorry. With Ibsen's A Doll's House in about, it's either late 18, I think it's in 1870s. I know one of you is going to look it up, so that's okay. Put it in the chat. So anyway, and there were others too. Chekhov viewed himself as a comic playwright, and he made fun of the inability of the upper classes of Russia to be flexible enough to live in the new world. They didn't have money. Same thing happened in England several about a century before. The titled people no longer had cash because the middle class was rising. And you can see that in the Cherry Orchard, where the peasant Lopak, the ex-peasant who is now a merchant, eventually owns the Cherry Orchard. And the last part of the play, you see them chopping down the trees. Stanislavski, the director who directed most of his works, saw him as a dramatic playwright, and he saw himself as a comic playwright. One of the best Chekhov interpreters I think that I've ever seen is Jackie Apodaca. Her Chekhov plays are really funny, and she's done two of them since. I think she's done two. No, we've done two Chekhov plays. One was dreary, and Jackie's was hilarious. And that's what he meant. That's what it was a parody of the upper classes. Anyway, so you had Ibsen and Chekhov looking at changes in society. Ibsen, The Doll's House was not a feminist play. It was a play advocating for society to treat all people equally and to give them full humanhood. And that meant poor people, it meant women, it meant everybody. Probably A Doll's House, it came from a play from a situation that he actually experienced. But his wife was the daughter of a very famous feminist of the time, who advocated for the women to be able to vote. And so he got a lot of ideas from there too. They met at one of her mother's little seminars that she used to give. So anyway, that's what modernism was. And absurdism is considered a part of the modernist movement, but in my mind, it actually is a movement that spans both modernism and leads us toward postmodernism. And I'll be spending the rest of the time explaining why I think that. For the most, in many ways, also. Oh, hi, Aiden. What you got?
Hi, sorry. I mean, so sorry, was it modernism or postmodernism that railed against the status quo as a way to reform society through art? Because I feel like that's both.
It's modernism.
It's modernism. Okay. Thank you.
Postmodernism might do that, but postmodernism has, in addition to that, moved away from the Aristotelian structure of plays. Beginning, middle, and end. We're telling a story here. And so there's a much freer use of stage. For example, four of the however many plays OSF is doing are one-person shows. That used to not be considered theater. Sometime in the 1970s with people like Lily Tomlin, if you know who she is, or Whoopi Goldberg, which I'm sure you know because she's still pretty famous. Boy, what's the Hispanic man? John Leguizamo. They all won Tonys for doing one-person shows. And the one-person shows that came about in the 70s started with an actor portraying a famous character in a one-person play. You had Give 'Em Hell Harry, which was about Harry Truman, and you had one about Will Rogers called, it's not Will Rogers Follies, because that actually has a cast. I don't remember what they called it, but there was a famous actor who played Will Rogers, and he was great. And these were just like monologues. I saw a guy doing a famous one-man show of a famous journalist from World War II, which I thought was kind of hokey because he read everything as if it was stuff that, wires that came to him giving him information and talking about stuff. But those were really popular for a while, and then stand-up comics started getting up and doing one-person shows. I don't know what the Bruce Springsteen play is about. I don't know if that has a cast or if it's just about Bruce Springsteen as a person. As a one-man show, I don't know. I don't remember. But a lot more things were being called theater that previously would have not been theater, because theater has to have dialogue. And these shows didn't have that. So in other ways, postmodernism from the 1980s took absurdism to a different level. So you have can't remember what it's called. One play in which the first part is a celebration for a woman who became a CEO of her company, and she has dinner with a whole bunch of different feminists from different eras. A woman from Japan who lived her whole life as a man so she could be a famous poet. And then the second act took up the plot. So it was really weird. You had this thing where they're just kind of throwing around different ideas. And then you get to a storied part where, given that context, you see this woman. It was really a play about choice in the early 80s. I think this was a Carol Churchill play. And I may get the title of it in my mind, so stand by. But in the early 1980s, the question of whether feminism was good for women or bad for women was a huge issue. Did or could women have it all? Could women raise families as a mother, as defined in the 1970s, and still be a breadwinner? And so that's really what the play was about. What are the limitations of feminism? And then it moved forward. That's why we have we have 4 waves of feminism now. Anybody know?
I think it's like 3 considered.
It might be. First was getting the vote. The second was getting rights. I was alive when my mother got her first credit card. In 1973, women were not allowed to get credit cards prior to that because all of their credit came through their husbands. So the husband, if he applied for a credit card, he could have his wife's name put on it. She could be a co-signer to it. But that would similar. They also couldn't own houses because it was assumed women couldn't afford houses because they didn't work. So it was a very different world when I was born than it is now. In my opinion, a better world because of postmodernism. But anyway, let's go to absurdism and look at that. Does that answer your question, Aiden? Okay.
Yeah.
So modernism still tried to adhere to the old kinds of play structures while responding to injustice in the world, whereas in postmodernism, the structures completely broke down. And yeah.
So both had the sort of like idea of sort of questioning society and trying to question absolute truth and reform. It's just that postmodernism also kind of questioned theater structure itself.
I'm not sure how to answer that. I don't think all postmodern plays are about rebelling against society, but more about talking about what society is. And is it Annie? What's Annie Baker? Playwright wrote. It's not Baker. It's Annie Washburn. Maybe. Wrote Mr. Burns, the post-apocalyptic. Yeah. Do you know who wrote
I
that?
love Mr. Burns. Yeah.
Do you
I
know
saw
who
that
wrote
one
it?
out in Montana.
What?
Oh, I saw that play out in Montana. Let me look
Oh.
up the author really quick. Mr. Burns play. Like,
The name is actually longer than that.
yeah, and Washburn. Mr. Burns, a
Okay.
post-electric play.
Good. At least her name was somewhere in my head. She also wrote a play in which the whole audience were on headphones. And the play depicts a technical rehearsal. And it's really stupid. I would be bored to death with it because they're actually talking about light cues and how to get things done. But then you have all this chit chat that's about what kind of sandwich they want to get after the rehearsal, and if they think that they talk about the actors like sometimes happens. It's a great play. Yes. I don't know who I'm talking. Oh, I can talk. Liam, what's up?
I'm curious. Does that play take place over the course of like one dress rehearsal, or is it a series of dress rehearsals?
Nope, it's just one.
It's just one? Okay.
Yeah, it's in her collected works. It's very good. It's a terrible play, but it's fun to read, especially for theater people.
Okay.
Tatum?
I was wondering if postmodernism is more like has the freedom to be more conceptual then rather than story driven,
Yes.
like concept driven. Okay.
Yes, because postmodern, and this isn't that someone just didn't say I'm going to be postmodernist now. And this is how we're going to do it. This developed over time. And I think the beginnings of that were the absurdist playwrights, which is one of the reasons I don't think absurdism was well understood But Beckett had it right. Beckett said to directors, say the lines, do the actions indicated in the script, and you're going to have a good play. And often he would come in and direct his own plays, and it's exactly what he did. People were asking what it's about, and he would say, it's about saying these lines and be fully dedicated to them and do the actions. And so it became the meaning was not the meaning was important, but understanding came through the actions of the play. It came through the process of the play from the beginning to the middle to the end. And I think, in my opinion, Beckett wrote two modernist plays, Waiting for Godot, and Hammond, Endgame, which is a chess term. And both of those had stories that you couldn't really follow, but they were there. And they can be analyzed that way. But the dialogue and the characters had very little to do with the meaning of the play. And yet you had to see the play to understand it. And ask my wife about that, because she understood Waiting for Godot. And I spent my whole life reading it. I have seen several productions of it. One was based on No Theater, which I found to be very interesting, and the two lead characters were women in that one. Anyway, I think all the rest of his plays are very short, maybe 10 minutes, sometimes longer, but there is no discernible plot. There are situations. In one play, a guy named Crap eats a lot of bananas, and I don't know why he does that. Maybe it ties this to monkeys, but every day on his birthday, he adds to this tape recording of his history. And so his life in the present is really his life in the past. And it's a very weird play, but it's really effective. But anyway, I think he slipped into postmodernism without anybody knowing it. And nobody knew what that meant at the time. Even when Estlin wrote his book, the term postmodernism had not been coined yet. So, and so everybody, all the critics, all the experts wanted to view all of Beckett's plays as the same style. I don't think that's true. And I think his second play, Endgame, is about, this is my own opinion, my own interpretation of the play, is about the end of modernism and the beginning of postmodernism. I think that's what the plot is about, which is kind of weird. But anyway.
So, really quick question.
Yeah.
When you mentioned how you interpret Endgame's one of its main meanings being the end of modernism into postmodernism, if now is the appropriate time to ask, is there like a certain like key moment or element that makes you think that?
No, it's actually based on research of what other people have said.
Fair.
And the historical desire to place Endgame or Waiting for Godot in a more specific setting. The set for Waiting Godot is a rock and a tree on a bare stage. The setting for Endgame is a box set with two windows upstage. Stage right is a door to the kitchen, and stage left is a door to the outside. And he actually sued Joanne Akalaitis for trying to put it in a subway station. He took her to court. He won his case, but the penalty that Joanne Akalaitis had to suffer, this was the Mabu Mines, I believe. It's a theater group. She had to put in she had to add to the program that this interpretation of the play was against the playwright's development, against the playwright's will for his work. He didn't control his own plays. I'm not sure. And so basically it gave that particular production of Endgame lots of publicity, and it was very, very successful. Maybe not
If
because of the
anything,
production. What?
rejecting the if anything, rejecting the author's original vision to such a degree where you're taking a court over it, and they have you put down in the program that this is not sanctioned by the playwright.
Right.
Is there, and this is just for the sake of the argument, right? Could you say that by doing so, it makes it more postmodernist to a degree?
Yes.
Hey, why not?
And the reason for that is that in modernism, authorial intent was very important. What did I was going to say Stephen Miller, but he was an asshole in the Trump White House. What was Arthur Miller's intention for Death of a Salesman? What did he want to say? And in today's world, it doesn't matter. It's what we interpret it as the meaning, and everybody can have a different interpretation, which is, of course, the same thing that was going on with modernism, just because of our idea of this rule that you had to go with what the author wanted to say. That's what you had to do, and you couldn't veer from the author's intention. But if you really think about it logically, who the hell knows what the author's intention is? And what about playwrights like Eugene O'Neill, who wrote wonderful plays, but they often meant stuff to other people that they didn't mean to O'Neill. There's always been a rumor that O'Neill was gay, and he was married his whole life. He contracted venereal diseases early on. They think that and drank. He was an alcoholic, and he stopped drinking several years after he stopped. After he started writing. But so how do we know what his intent is? He has a gay character, or we assume he's gay, in Strange Interlude, which is a 5-hour play. Sit through that, and then I'll call you an O'Neill fan. And he has a gay character, and a lot of people believe that gay character is the author's voice in the play. And he never says he's gay, but he adheres to what the stereotypes of what gay people were. He lived with his mother still. He didn't like women. Sex with a woman made him feel disgusted. He was still a virgin because he didn't know he was gay. And at the end of the play, he ends up with the leading woman. She's gone through all these torrid affairs, and she fell in love, and then her husband, they didn't get married because her father didn't want it, and the husband goes off and gets killed in World War I. And then she resents her father, and she becomes very promiscuous, and finally marries a guy who's boring, but she has affairs all over the place, and she has a son from a man outside of marriage. And it's just this mixed up soap opera-y thing. The big thing about that play was his most popular is because everybody vocalized their inner thoughts. So he was capitalizing on the popularity of Freud in American culture at the time. Psychoanalysis was a brand new thing. And so by saying they're under what the actors were really thinking, and it was in very poetic language, he felt he was getting to some sort of truth. But how do we interpret that? Do we believe that he may have been gay? He apparently, with his third wife, it was a very maternal relationship. They may not have had sex a lot. They had different separate bedrooms, which was common at the time, but we don't know because no one ever wrote about it. But the point is that why can't you look at the play that way, even though the author would not do that? Look at other things. So the idea of authorial intent is such that, hang on, I gotta let my dogs out. They have to get a cookie from one of Kyle's friends. You wanna go get a cookie? There you go. They'll want to come back in. They guard me when I'm teaching. Sorry about that. So authorial intent doesn't have the impact that we think it did. You know, because plays mean stuff to us, and that's not an ambiguous thing. Everyone's allowed to have their own interpretation of a play. Some of them are stupid because they don't really encompass the entire play, and that's a problem with the inability of Americans to understand the difference between analyzing a play from a production point of view and analyzing a play from a literary point of view. If that doesn't make sense to you, in literature, if you read plays in an English class, this is the work of art. The book that you read, oh, here's one. Here's The Visit. This is the work of art that you study. The script. That's the literature. But in theater, we look at a play in terms of how it's going to be visualized on stage, what it's going to sound like, and the pacing and all that stuff that has tremendous amount of influence on the meaning of the play, but it's not part of the script. It's the director's choice. So in other words, for a theater person, this is not the work of art. It's the beginning of the work of art. It's the basis for the work of art. And in postmodernism, the artist, the theater artist is given priority over the literary artist. Although today, playwrights who are premiering a play for the first time almost always have a seat in the room. Although on Broadway, my understanding is that nowadays the producer can fire the playwright, and if they're not interpreting the play the way the director is. I know one instance in which that happened and really ruined the playwright's career. So, all right. So let me go back and let me start at the beginning from what absurdism is, and maybe we'll get through this lecture before the end of the period. Okay. I have about 20 minutes. So absurdism is a specific kind of theatrical expression. But it's an undefined type. And for the most part, theater of the absurd is based on the philosophy of existentialism. Does anybody know what existentialism is and can define it for us? Yes, Aiden.
Well, now I'm nervous.
That's okay. Be nervous.
Existentialism is sort of the philosophy of human beings as a free agent of their own will, without any sort of God or absolute truth to define them. They have to define their own essence. It's a lot about fluidity and freedom and defining oneself.
Good. That's exactly what it is. No need to be nervous. That was great. Does that make sense to everybody? Now, almost all of the absurdist playwrights denied even knowing what existentialism was. Beckett, Ionesco, they all denied it. They didn't think that they were existentialists because they had never studied existentialism. It was just their experiences as a human being had led them to these conclusions that there was no God, or if there was a God, God had no effect on human existence. So it might as well be no God. And they discussed that idea at length, generally putting it into very, very specific contexts. So Beckett's context was that the human condition is, I'm giving you a hint as to what the play is about. I hope this helps you and that doesn't hurt you. It's a play about the condition of humans in which the humans are waiting to die. They are waiting for something to happen to them that will give their life meaning. Because without that, their lives will not have meaning. So the real communication of Waiting for Godot is not the dialogue, and it's not the action, except for the action of waiting for someone to provide meaning in their lives. They meet people, they meet Lucky and Pozo, and those people don't bring me, they just kind of interact, and then that's it. And then they go away. And then they come back in the second act. So he's really looking at the modern religious tenets and kind of blowing them up. And in the forward of absurdist theater of the absurd, Eslin uses Waiting for Godot as an example of this kind of meaning. He says that the first real successful production of Waiting, people were fascinated with it because they couldn't understand it. And again, Bert Lars said he didn't understand it. He just played for the jokes and it worked just fine. But there was a group in San Francisco called the Actors Workshop, and they did a production of Waiting for Godot in San Quentin prison, a free show for all the inmates, and all the inmates came because they didn't have to do their work. It's like Johnny Cash coming and doing a concert. And he said the expectation was that most people would kind of go in and come out of the theater, go smoke, and that it would be a complete mess. And he says that that's not what happened. That the entire population of San Quentin was riveted to the stage the entire time. And he suggests that this is because the situation that Gogo and Ruru, where do I have that? Didi and Gogo are in was very accessible to people who don't have freedom, whose lives are a routine that is not their own. And they sat riveted. And he says they were the first audience that really understood the play. And it's because you have to understand the play by sympathizing with the conditions that the play sets forward. So it's the world of the play that carries the meaning, and how that world of the play is parallel to our own world. What elements are the same that give the play meaning? So it's not communicating through its plot, it's communicating through the expectation of the audience for realism, and changing the world of the play to a point where there are only parallels. It's a myth. It's a parable that doesn't say, hey, God doesn't matter, so stop waiting for him. It's this guy Godot keeps promising to come, but we never see him. He comes through this emissary who's a small boy to say whether he's going to be there or not. And he's never shown up, but they come back and wait for him. And they wait for him to give their life. They don't know why he wants to see them, but they assume they're going to give. So, and in each of these plays, there's a different context. And Ionesco was from Romania and left before the Nazi takeover, but the play is actually, Rhinoceros is actually a parable about World War II and the acceptance of Nazism. So there's another one you can look at. You don't have to take mine. I want you to be able to look at it, as a play and read it and let it affect you, and then talk about how it's communicating, whatever you think it's communicating. And I already talked to you about one of the real late absurdist playwrights, Joe Orton, and that was an expression of the world in which he lived in, which was totally different than the world we live in. You could also take there's a play called never mind, I'll come back to it. I can't remember it. Sorry. I shouldn't go on tangents because I can never remember what they are. Anyway, so so it seems that absurdism the ideas came from the battlefields of World War II and also from the cities. Beckett was an Irishman who worked for James Joyce, the novelist, at the time. He was his secretary, did the research and stuff like that. And when the Nazis took over France, he began fighting for the French underground. Okay, so the French underground was a group of Frenchmen who refused to accept Germany conquering France, which it did. And they had the Vichy government, which cooperated fully with Nazis, let them take all the art pieces they wanted, and they were the formal government. But a man named Charles de Gaulle, who was a general in the army before the war, led a group of, and he became president of France for many, many years after the war. The airport in Paris is named after him, Charles de Gaulle Airport. He's very famous. But he led this underground. And if you think about what an underground is, it is soldiers who can never leave the front lines, ever. Because the front lines are where they're living, and they do their best to obstruct and demoralize the occupying forces. And they could be captured and killed at any moment if someone has informed on them. So there's a lot, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of, can you imagine going to bed every night afraid that you might be killed before you wake up? That's what these guys went through for 4 or 5 years. Because France was taken over, I think, in 41. And it went till 45, maybe late 44. So it's a scary, and that affects you, and it gives you a different perspective of life. And that was Beckett's perspective. Ionesco had a similar experience in World War II. Not the same, but I think he also moved to France, and as a Romanian, moved to France. So it's, and then the other part of that cultural input into absurdism is the invention of the atom bomb and then the hydrogen bomb. Because for the first time, humans could destroy the world, the entire world, if they wanted to. We had enough firepower for them to do that. We didn't know it when we dropped the bomb, but we did. And there's all sorts of literature on what would happen if a nuclear war occurred. And in modern times, since we don't accept that a nuclear war will not annihilate the world, it's always a post-apocalyptical. Is that a word? Apocalyptical? Well, if you get it, you got to hang on. My wife's coming to me. There's a full pot of coffee in the kitchen. Oh, good. Thank you. I have to make, when I teach, I have to make a second pot of coffee for us. So she's going to go fill it. Anyway, so those are kind of the influences that have been kind of thrust upon absurdism. But I see it as a philosophical movement toward a postmodern world. And it happened very rapidly from 1945 to, and Beckett was writing in the 40s. Ionesco was writing in the 40s. So right after World War II, this kind of new expression came out that was a completely different kind of communication than traditional theater. And that's why all of these ideas could come out at the same time. It's like a whole bunch of people inventing the automobile at the same time, but only one person getting credit for it. And in America, we don't even give it to the person who actually invented it. We give it to Henry Ford, who just developed factory work for it, the assembly line. All right. So to me, absurdist theater communicates on a metaphysical plane. It discusses the way we view the world and places us in a world in which that makes absolutely no sense. Presumably, Didi and Gogo do not have to return to that same place with the tree and the rock to wait for Godot every day. But they do, that's their choice. And they can't move forward with their lives until they meet him. And that would be a parallel of the traditions of Western religion. That we are looking toward getting into heaven, so we have to follow these rules. And some of the rules are great. I'm not saying that. It's just that we made them into rules rather than enforcing them through social pressure, through legal pressure. We made lots of rules that make no sense. You can't drink on Sundays. What does that mean? Or you can't buy liquor on Sundays. Actually, you can get as drunk as you want on Sundays. You just can't buy it that day. And I'm not advocating becoming an alcoholic either. I'm just using that as an example. All right. So reading a play and kind of letting it wash over you. Oh, go ahead, Rosemary. Sorry.
I was wondering, after reading the play, is there a filmed version you'd recommend?
Some of them, yes. Some of them, no. Rhinoceros, absolutely. They did a film version of Rhinoceros with Zero Mostel as Berenger's best friend, and Gene Wilder, I think, played Berenger. And while as I see Berenger as a very heavy set guy, Gene Wilder's really skinny. And when in the first act, the Zero Mostel role actually turns into a rhinoceros. He begins it on stage and then runs into the bathroom, and then Berenger starts to talk to him, but he only hears grunting noises from the bathroom. And he goes up and pounds on the door, and the response to that is this rhinoceros horn coming through the door. So he's turned into a rhinoceros, and Berenger, of course, runs away. That's a hard play to read because there's lots of dialogue in there that's important to the overall understanding of the play, and they're easy to miss. So I don't have a problem with you as a critic looking at plays and movies of the plays. It's just when you try to base a production on someone else's production, you cease to be an artist. Although I don't imagine many playwrights or many directors who are directing plays that have been done before haven't seen a production of what they're doing. That's part of what inspires them. Did that answer your question, Rosemary?
Yeah, I was just wondering if there was like a specific filmed version of Waiting for Godot that you like, or one that you really hate.
I've never seen one.
Just so I know. Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, and for you guys, I'm not a movie guy. I watch a lot of movies, but I don't analyze them. In fact, now I watch plays and I don't analyze them unless I want to later. You'll get there if you keep watching plays, and start being able to watch plays in the moment without having to think about writing about them afterward. That's really what screws it up, but it's an important step for theater artists. Anyway, so I know I don't have that. There may be
Okay.
and there's a biographical movie called Prick Up Your Ears which is also a biography of Joe Orton that may do more to explain the play we're reading than the play itself. He was kind of a he was a minor protester. He got arrested for writing in library books and then returning them and drawing pictures in them. He died very young. His lover killed him. His lover was another playwright who got jealous when he became successful and thought that Orton was going to leave him, and maybe he was, I don't know. And killed him when he was very young, I think in his 20s. And it is, who was the guy who played the bad guy in The Fifth Element? He recently
Gary Oldman.
Gary
Gary
Oldman.
Oldman, yes. Gary Oldman starred as Joe Orton, and Alfred Molina was his lover. And it was the first leading roles for both those actors. And it's an indie film that is just fantastic. It's kind of like watching a film of one of the early punk rock groups. It's, the Ramones or something. Because they're very, very explosive personalities in the play. But it helps you understand the context from where he wrote his plays. So I would suggest to you that you focus on the world of the play within the context of what the characters are going through. We know in real life that people do not turn into rhinoceroses, but by the end of Rhinoceros, everybody in Paris is a rhinoceros, except for Berenger. And that's when you really have to read the dialogue. So you can't have this idea that it's a realist. You can't read it like a realistic play and understand it. Waiting for Godot is hard because we see it as a realistic play, and we can't understand why these guys are waiting for another person. That's why people interpreted that Godot is God. But no, it's a metaphor for living outside of the present, living for some sort of future, which for you guys is important because you're learning how to do the things you want to do for your future, whether you know it or not. And so students are always in a kind of a state of living for the future, full-time students. Whereas part-time students or adult learners are in a situation in which they're living life and then they are also studying. They tend to be better students because there's a clearer you guys kind of have to live your classes, because that's a major part of your existence is looking toward the future. So it's a little bit weird. And of course, college life isn't like reality. That's why we call it, I'm going to join the real world. And it's one of the reasons professors become professors, because we, for at least in some way, shape, or form, prefer that lack of reality in the world. Sometimes it's for power, sometimes it's for love, but we all have it's all about, it depends on our own college experiences. So keep that in mind if you want to teach in college. Okay, but most of these worlds can be seen as realistic worlds, except maybe Rhinoceros. But they're not. Just like no play is actually real, it's all in a conceived world, a made-up world in which these things have to happen throughout the play. These are the same, except I think that there is more meaning that is communicated through the world of the play and the situation the character's in than the other parts of drama. And we know in Aristotelian drama, it is the plot of the play, the characters, the thought, and moving down to the less important ones, but it's always about what the story is and the story we're telling. And I would suggest that absurdism, for the most part, does not do that. Oh, okay. I have a little bit more to go, and I'm not going to do it today. We'll pick up this on Monday. Are there any quick questions before you have to go? Okay, we'll pick up on Monday.
Wait,
Yeah.
is the recordings gonna be on Moodle?
Yes. If I can post them, I will.
Okay.
For my other class, I'm doing lectures, and I recorded it on my computer, and it's too big to go on the computer. So I have to do something else. So if it fits on Moodle, I'll put it on Moodle. And I've done it before, so it should. Okay.